have to wait till everybody comes back. So, I just have a few more things to say on verse 1. And I think they might be best said by just reading you a couple of excerpts from the commentary that I'm publishing. Buddha Dharma teaches that due to our actions and their consequences, our karma, beings live countless lives in myriads of forms in the different realms of existence, and that in this process it is virtue, goodness, that brings us into life as a human being. This human life, difficult to attain and precious in potential, can be understood and lived as a spiritual opportunity or as an ordinary human life. But it is not ordinary, this lifetime in which we can recognize the predicament of sentient beings and seek to resolve it for ourselves and for others. In this very lifetime, in this very body, our altruistic aspirations and love can flower in bodhicitta. And you don't have to be convinced about rebirth in order to understand the uniqueness and value of the particular specific human life you are living right now. It will not be repeated. So whatever may be your highest spiritual aspiration, this is the lifetime in which to bring it to its fullest possible fruition. Okay? Deal? No pressure. No pressure, just openness, just invitation. And exhortation. Now, I want to read something that I wrote quite a while ago that has to do with the realms, the different realms that we spoke of earlier, and how it became meaningful for me. Again, this is using personal experience. I hope you don't mind that I do that. I do it because I think I'm like everybody else. You know, I mean, we all have the same stuff to deal with in our minds. Our circumstances may be different, but our minds are very similar. And like me, I think many have a little allergic response to thinking about heavens and hells and beings at higher levels and beings at lower levels. That's a kind of kind of childish reaction on our part at this point. We don't need to stay in that track. Instead, we can understand that we, like all beings of whatever species, in whatever time, have more and less beneficial ways of thinking, seeing, speaking, and acting. There's your higher and lower right there. Right? And each of those is a seed of cause that will eventuate, will manifest its result in some way at some time. I was not a serious student of karma for most of my life, and I think that's very much like most Westerners. Particularly in the United States, and maybe also even in Europe, I'm not sure, but certainly in the part of the West that I have some familiarity with, we tend to think about cause and effect a little differently than the teachings on karma would have us think about them. We tend to think, as a friend once put it, we tend to think that if we are suffering, it's someone else's fault, and they should probably be paying us for that, right? Isn't that kind of what it looks like in our society? That's upside down, right? Rinpoche teaches so eloquently and so precisely, you will never experience anything in any lifetime or circumstance of any lifetime that you yourself have not laid down the seed of cause for. And that's, later when we get to the verse that's specifically about karma, we'll talk more about that, but that is a very liberating teaching, very liberating. It may sound as if it's prison for you, but it's not. It's the key to the prison. But I want to read you this personal story. It's not terribly long, but it's longer than what I've read so far. But I should ask your permission, because some people don't like to be read to and would really prefer not to hear things read. Is that the case for most of you, or is it okay that I do this from time to time? Okay? Okay, good. Well, I've spent two years on writing this book. I don't mind having a chance to read from it occasionally, because how many ways can you say a certain thing? Right? So Rinpoche has actually said, and he said to me personally, and I've heard him say to others, I've heard him say in teachings, and I've read in people's notes and transcripts him saying, you will only become free from the cycle of existence, the ocean of suffering, if your whole heart wants to become free. So when I asked you to look at the purpose of a human life, and then the highest purpose of human life, and then I asked you to look at your purpose, now we can tune that a little bit more finely to, is your purpose for this lifetime a wholehearted purpose to fulfill the highest spiritual aspiration that you can form at this time? Not the highest that somebody else might hold, but the one that you can hold. Because it's just like when you climb mountains. You climb a mountain, you fulfill this aspiration, and immediately the next higher aspiration is revealed to you. It becomes available to you to start working in that direction. So when I said be honest, I really meant be honest about what is your highest spiritual aspiration at this time in your life. Right? If it's to develop, as my friend said, a little more compassion, maybe you'll have the good fortune to meet someone like me who says, let's think again about that, or maybe not. But you will certainly, if your aspiration is to develop a little more compassion, you will. You will develop a little more compassion. And when you've developed a little more compassion, you'll see, oh, I can go further than that. I can develop a little more compassion than this even. So aspiration leads to aspiration. So don't criticize yourself, just see honestly where the aspiration is now and commit yourself to fulfilling that in this lifetime. And don't close the door to the possibility that it may open up for you an aspiration that seems even more improbable. That means vast. In Dharma speak, improbable means vast. Okay? All right, so when I thought about this, this comment of Rinpoche, only if your whole heart wants to become free, here's what I then wrote. Wholehearted. I'd been studying and practicing Dharma for some years when a friend brought me a gift from India, a small saffron-colored cotton panel printed with a simple line drawing of the Bhava Chakra, the wheel of existence, which graphically depicts the sufferings of beings in the 6 realms of samsara. In this cosmology, the 3 lower realms are the hell realms, manifesting the afflictions of anger, hatred, the animal realms, manifesting instinct-based existence, and the realm of hungry ghosts or insatiable spirits, manifesting craving, grasping, and miserliness. The 3 higher realms are those of humans who have choice and therefore also doubt. Remember that. Who have choice and therefore also doubt. Okay? Demigod, this is a recapitulation of what I said earlier, but just in different language, a bit more precise. Demigods tormented by jealousy, and gods whose virtuous karma has brought circumstances of great ease and pleasure, but along with it moral laziness, no longer accumulating virtue. Eventually they must fall. Extremes of suffering characterize the lower realms, but suffering pervades them all. In my daily practice, I'd been contemplating the realms and the causes of their ordeals and sufferings, but in a rather perfunctory way. My comprehension shallow, and my compassion therefore abstract. My fleeting moments of urgency were basically about me. Though intense and intent, I was not wholehearted. Then, as I opened a long solo retreat, I placed that humble cotton cloth on my little practice table, the one that depicted the various realms of existence. It became the first and last thing I saw as I took my seat and rose from it. Daily, I began to place myself in each realm of existence, one after the other, confronting those beings' specific sufferings and probing my ordinary habitual mind and behavior to find the kinds of thoughts and actions that cause each kind of suffering. They weren't hard to find, though it was hard to bear the anguish of seeing them so starkly and experiencing them in such a raw, undefended way there in my snowbound mountain solitude. When I saw in my own mind how anger, for example, is an actual realm of hellish experience as I live it here and now, it was no stretch at all to understand how anger, hatred, as a habitual reaction pattern, becomes a powerful predisposition of mind and behavior, sowing more seeds of itself with each episode, now and for future lifetimes. It became first acutely painful, and then an immense relief to understand that this is simply the dynamic interplay of cause and consequence that we call karma. In my own mind and conduct are to be found the seeds of every kind of misfortune and confusion I experience in every moment. That's what Rinpoche was saying. Yeah. This gives me insight every single day into the condition of myself and others, and into how, for the benefit of others and myself, I can directly address specific causes of specific kinds of suffering and continuous rebirth, even the moment-to-moment birth and rebirth of confused states of mind. This intense labor, and this went on for months. So this was a daily practice for months. I forget how many, but a long time. This intense labor birthed in me an unbearable compassion for beings in every condition of existence, surging forth as the profound, implacable, consuming desire and intention to liberate us all. The rough little cloth on my practice table, is beings helplessly transmigrating through realms of confusion and suffering, became the physical and moral base, the very ethical ground of my reflections and practice throughout the day, throughout that retreat, and throughout my life since then. Relying upon them broke my heart, open. Watered with my tears for all beings, my relatives in the circle of life, the Bodhi seed began to grow. At that small table, hour upon hour, day after day, month after month, I was literally leaning like this upon the sufferings of all beings for the liberation of this one. Now the wheel of existence is inscribed on my heartbone. Now I call upon all suffering beings to rely upon this one. I highly recommend that practice, to really consider the condition. We don't have to always use the word suffering, because it doesn't just mean torment and agony. It means also the sort of unscratchable itch of existence, you know. There's the apple has a worm in it, you know. But this discipline of really considering the conditions of beings as we see and experience, and not other than the condition of our own mind and our own experience, and looking at it really honestly in terms of how our thoughts and our speech and our other kinds of actions keep us going in the rut that we're in. You know, we didn't get where we are overnight. Right? The rut that we're in of our habitual actions that make our lives of difficulty only gets deeper. That rut only gets deeper unless we interrupt it, right? Unless we change course and restrain and refrain from the habituated and choose instead the conscious. And this process that I just described in what I read to you was a process of allowing to become conscious that which is immensely more powerful because not fully conscious. The motivations that are below the level of consciousness have much more power over our minds and our actions than those that are right up there where we can see them. We're not at choice with most of the motivations that cause trouble for us. Do you know what that means, that expression, at choice? We're not capable of a free choice about something that we don't see, right? It's something we don't recognize. We're not capable of choosing freely to engage it or to refrain from engaging it. Does that make sense? No? Okay, so imagine yourself in a car and you're tootling along because you just love to drive, you know, love that freedom of the road and the full tank of gas. You know, we're American, right? we love that car and the open road. And you're tootling along, and you're just happy on the road, and I hope this metaphor doesn't get away from me, but, you know, it might. And you go right past the intersection that was going to take you to the place where you intended to go and do something really beneficial for yourself and others. You went right past the intersection and you didn't even notice that you passed it, and then you found yourself in Las Vegas. End of story. No, actually, continuation of story. I don't know if you're a gambler. I'm not. But Las Vegas is a potent symbol for us all, right? Freedom and disaster, right? The bright lights and what they shine on, you know, what they show. So if you don't see the intersection, you go right past it because your habit was to simply drive and enjoy the open road. And the intersection, well, it's like the road to Vegas. The intersections are so few and far between, you could be hypnotized by the time you come to them, and you won't see them. And hypnosis is a good way of describing our general condition. You know, we're hypnotized by our conditioning. And what has conditioned us continues to condition us until we start to shift. And that's why I'm speaking so at length this morning about intention, about motivation, intention, and opportunity, potential and opportunity, because it underlies everything else we're going to study in this text. Now does it make sense? Yeah. Good. Yeah. Somehow Vegas, as an example, helps people understand the Dharma really pretty well. Okay, we have a little bit more time. I'm going to defer this till afternoon, so just let you know. This was to Amy, right? And I think we could start on verse 2, but that seems like dizzying speed, does it not? I don't know. I was just going to suggest that maybe the rest of we have about 25 minutes left, yeah, so maybe we should do some Q&A, or at least some Q. Who said, do you have a question? Yes, Linda, did you say your name was? Liz, okay. Linda, okay. Oh, wait a minute, I promised I wouldn't use names, or I would try not to. That's okay, okay.
If I'm hearing you right, you're saying that the distractions that we have are not really on the outside.
Thank you. Thank you. They are not on the outside principally. Well, it's an excellent question, and I could spend an hour or two talking about it probably, but I'll try to restrain myself. The outer distractions are only powerful because of the inner impulse and tendency to seek distraction. Right? Like somebody who's not looking to be distracted, pretty much anything can happen in the outer realm and it won't distract them. It's amazing what you don't notice if you're undistracted. Like he didn't notice the intersection to Vegas because he was undistracted in his enjoyment of the open road that just goes like this in the desert. Yeah? So that tendency to be distracted is really a tendency to seek distraction, to be open and available to distraction. And what I would ask you to do is what I had to do when I realized I was thinking in that way about distraction. I had to say, okay, what is it we're really looking to be distracted from? You know, it's the condition of our mind in that moment. Now, it may be that you are in great pain from being having illness or being injured or something. You'd like some distraction from that, right? But even the immense suffering that you can be in when you have immense pain is also a matter of the mind. And because of the nature of the work that you've done, you've probably seen that up close, that people who have a lot of pain can go through it without mental suffering, and just experience it as pain. But the mind, hanging on to it, fixated on it, this is not fair, I don't want this is unbearable, I can't live with it, it's intolerable, it shouldn't happen to me, which of course always implies it should happen to someone else other than you, which is not really a very bodhisattvic way to think. So that mind is grasping and repulsing in relation to the pain, right? And that's what we're going to talk about in verse 2. Those reactions of mind. So if you're grasping onto something, or you're trying to get it away from you, or you're making up some kind of story about it, you are engaged with it with your mind in a way that is really all about you. It's all about whether you like it, whether you hate it, or whether you're just terrified of it. That's all about you. It's making very small the world in which you're experiencing that moment of suffering or confusion, whatever it may be. But the mind that is easily distractible, or the mind that's seeking distraction, it's probably not too much of a generalization to say that mind is seeking distraction from its present condition. Because if you weren't bothered by something, why would you seek to get away from it? at one level, yeah? If you go a little further, what I saw when I pursued this matter in my mind because I was exploring the process of distraction, what I saw is that at a deeper level, we are defended. We're trying to defend ourselves from that which is threatening, the boundless. We at some level know ourselves as beyond the finite that we are presently living in, because we have physical bodies and we live in a physical world, and that we presently define ourselves in relationships to that, and therefore we define ourselves as finite. Does this make sense? Yes? Okay, and then if I say to you, what sees that? There's a little taste of something beyond the totally physical finite. Just a little taste, maybe. Because you can't point to and touch what sees you, your mind. You could try. And, there's a whole bodies of science that say the mind is really based in the brain, and all of consciousness is caused by the brain. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a, brain scientist. I don't know, but I'm open to finding out, and this is the avenue I'm pursuing at the moment for finding out. So, if we don't want to be let me say that differently. If we are fully identified with our material existence, our physical existence, and all of its potentials and limitations, if we're fully identified with that, and that's who we think we are and nothing else, then if we get a little hint at some point that we might, a little hint, that could be frightening. So, I don't know if this is legit or not. I have no idea, but I'll say it anyway because it came into my mind. Perhaps the fundamental purpose of our distractibility is not to see what we might see, or not to recognize what we might recognize, if we could just do nothing and be in the moment that we're in, no holds barred. I'm just putting that out there, just saying. It's a good question. Why are we distractible? But remember that non-distraction is remembering. And so the further we go in our practice, our spiritual practice, and our spiritual disciplines, following them and really deepening in our relationship to our motivation and our potential, the more we have the capacity, and perhaps the desire and willingness, to be with not knowing. That in itself is kind of an openness that frightens us. We are creatures, we humans, who really like control and predictability. and I'll speak about this more also when we come to verse number 2, which is on what we call the three poisons, or the afflictive emotions. And I've touched on the three are attraction, repulsion, and ignorance or confusion. And I've just touched on all three of them in this last little bit of time. So we'll have a nice segue to verse 2. So, but did I respond, whatever the question was, and whoever posed it, did I respond to it, or did I go? Okay. Okay, good. I'm really glad you asked it just exactly at that moment, too. It was a really good time. Yes, Eric. Oops. Would you prefer that I not use your names? It's just natural to me. Okay, good. All right. Thank you.
So in verse number 1, we're instructed to listen, reflect, and meditate.
You're expected to?
We're instructed.
Instructed to listen, yeah, listen, reflect, and meditate.
There's no mention of speaking, acting, like in verse 1. Why is that?
Nice question. We could say that we're being instructed to listen, reflect, and meditate day and night without distraction, and to act accordingly. All right. Those three activities named, are listening, reflecting, and meditating, are what practice means in the Buddha Dharma. Those are three forms of practice. We tend to think, when we use the word practice, we tend to think it has something to do with a cushion and, a spiritual-looking environment and so on, and maybe even a certain costume and whatever, and stillness and looking within and so on. In other words, having to do with meditation, or in the Vajrayana, in the Tibetan tradition, perhaps with recitation, of mantra and visualization of deity and so on. But the three forms are listening, or receiving teachings, or studying teachings that you're given, right, in a book, or from a teacher, or from a Sangha member. So that would be listening, sometimes called hearing, or studying. And then the second one is sometimes called thinking, which means pondering, contemplating, considering, reflecting on, trying to understand, often, in relation to texts that you've studied, or other sources of information about the Dharma, and your own experience also, very importantly, understanding the teachings that you have been receiving. And that's an active engagement. And then meditating is when we cultivate, I'm sorry, I have an injury in my shoulder, I'm clutching it because it hurts. And then in meditating is when we be with what we experience, what we study, what we learn, what we what we know, what we don't know. We be with. We cultivate the ability to be with. Sometimes we say to sit with, but not. You don't have to be sitting in order to be meditating. So to be with is a more expansive term, and that means attention with awareness, and not necessarily engaging. But that's a gradual process by which we learn how to practice in that way. So all three of these are considered aspects of practice in the Dharma. And I mentioned the Strong Heart Sangha in Sacramento. We talked about that the last time I was there, and it seemed valuable to denote these three and emphasize that these are also considered practice, because if we think it's just meditating, I can't tell you how many times my spiritual friends have said, Barbara, I just don't have time to meditate, and I sit on the cushion and I fall asleep, and and so that's a restrictive understanding of what it means to take the Dharma that you're receiving and incorporate, reflect on, consider, come into relationship with in an active way. So these three are the ways that we do that. And so that is activity. And then the other thing that we tend to do when we think about practice, even with these kinds of practice, we think of them as, okay, I've practiced, now I'm going to go out and, and do whatever it is I do in the way I always do it. But it's not for us to take what we receive as teachings and to engage in practice, and then just add that, as a decoration to our habitual and confused ways of being in the world and in our lives. The Dharma is not decorative; it's demolition. We don't want to add Dharma onto what exists already. We want to bring our lives up into the Dharma. It's not even, our work is really not even to bring Dharma into our lives, although often we use an expression like that. I want to integrate the Dharma in my life. But that implies that the life is the stable factor and you're going to bring the Dharma into that. But that's not really what's going on here. The Dharma is the stable factor. We want to bring our lives into that. Yeah, stable factor is that's just what came into my mind to speak. But the Dharma is what has continuity, power, and truth. Our lives are wavering, unstable, and highly conditioned. So we want to bring that which is riven with falsehood, to be honest, that which is riven with falsehood, up into the realms of where truth is being given. We're being given teachings that are true teachings, and we want to be influenced by them. So we have to be open to being influenced by them rather than closing the box around them. So, yes.
I don't know how much on this, but
You speak up. I'm hard of hearing.
meditation, I understand the formal, meditating in the morning when you wake up or that type of thing, but very often if something happens during the day, and let's say I'm upset about it, I'll try to meditate actually during that time to be calmer, be more accepting. And sometimes I wonder if that is meditation or, I mean, practice what you do, and part of that is the meditation, and then what I experience during the day and in my life. So I don't know if that's sort of where you're going with what you're saying or not, or what you think about.
I think there are countless kinds of meditation, countless activities that people could call meditation and that perform some function that clears the mind or gentles the mind or whatever. This is in many traditions. Many traditions have something that we in the Dharma call meditation, but that might be called contemplation in another tradition, or recalling, remembrance practice. If the purpose of the meditation is for you to be able to tolerate your momentary suffering, then that's a good purpose, I think, don't you? If it's also and then on another level, it might be the purpose of you might recall a practice that I'm not sure what kind of meditation you're talking about, but you might recall a practice or an image or something that gives you a sense of peace, and that you might then feel that you're able to be in that circumstance in a way that's not only better for you, but also is more gentle for others or more supportive for others. So that's a slightly nobler motive, right? And then there's also meditation practices that are really simply to keep our mind moving in a direction that's not harmful. Like sometimes using mantra instead of letting your mind just go free in some way that's really negative thinking, that's harmful for you and for others. So, so there are many, many different kinds of meditation. And meditation on the spot, which is sort of what you're describing, meditation on the spot, is usually in response to a need for being on the spot in a different way than you're being on the spot, right? And that's I would call that rescue remedy meditation, right? 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 And that's good too. Each time, and this is what you weren't here for this morning, but so I'm glad that your question gives me a chance to give you this information. Each action of body, speech, and mind that you take, if it's just for your own benefit or to let you survive in a given moment, has a very positive benefit in that moment for you, but it's a very limited benefit because it's for you. And you are only one. And everybody else is more than you because there are more of them, right? So we embed every intention of our practice, whether it's hearing, reflecting, or meditating, in the intention that it liberate all beings from the suffering that we're in that moment, right? So then it's got the heart of meditation, because the heart of meditation, the heart of any kind of spiritual practice, is love. Yes? And love for oneself is really called egotism, but love for oneself as one of all sentient beings is not egotism. It's love for oneself as one of and a representative of all sentient beings. That way we escape instantly, just like this, from the trap that we are always in if we're not escaping it, or if we haven't put it so far beyond us that we're not even attracted to it anymore, the trap of self-grasping, right? That's the trap. That's the cause of all our suffering, self-grasping. So if you go to a rescue remedy meditation in a moment when things are hot for you or difficult for you, and in that moment, at some point in that endeavor to calm your own mind or to be able to tolerate somebody else's mind or activities, in that moment you can just remember countless beings throughout eons in all worlds have experienced this exact same kind of suffering or pain or confusion that I'm now in. Let mine free them all. May mine be sufficient. Just remember that. May mine be sufficient. That will change your life. Periodically during the weekend I will say that will change your life. And if you practice it, it'll change your life. If you don't practice it, it won't. But that will change your life. May mine be sufficient. May my suffering liberate all beings from suffering. And then it's a rescue remedy meditation for everyone. That's power, yes? Yeah. Otherwise, it's a kind of grasping of, I'm suffering, I got to stop suffering. But then it's, I'm suffering, look how big my suffering is. I can offer this for everyone. How wonderful is that? That's the way a bodhisattva thinks. Yeah? Do you like that? That's very practical Dharma, isn't it? Very practical. And that's the kind of heartbeat of the 37 practices. Turn the appearance on its head and just like turn it inside out. The complete opposite of the way we usually think is a great way to think usually. And if you dedicate it to the liberation of all. See? And that is it for the morning. Yeah. I'm filled with joy as sitting with you. I just am filled with the joy of your presence and your attention and your inquiry, because I can feel you taking what's being given and using it and storing it away like little squirrels, Your cheeks are getting fat with Dharma. Now, normally at the end of a session, we dedicate the merit of our virtuous activity to the liberation of all beings. We can do that, and I would like us to do that this time. But when you're in retreat, for example, if you do retreat on your own, if you've been doing practice for many years and you've been dedicating for many years, you can go the whole day without dedicating until the very end of the day, because you never separate your mind from your intention. But as long as our minds are still so separable, and we don't always remember, we're going to dedicate the merit. Because otherwise, if you go outside and trip on my shoe and you mutter something, an imprecation they call it, you'll have blown the good juice that you just stored up. So I want us to do a short dedication prayer. So see if I can find one here. Well, this one's good, page 10. Yeah? So the purpose of dedicating the merit is so that it becomes the merit of all beings. It's like we put it in the Bodhisattva bank, everybody can withdraw from it. By the virtues collected in the 3 times, by myself and all beings in samsara and nirvana, and by the innate root of virtue, may I and all sentient beings quickly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, precious enlightenment. Thank you so much. Please come back this afternoon. And please enjoy your lunch.